In today's world, it often feels like we're surrounded by an endless buzz of noise. Whether it's the constant hum of social media notifications, the rush of conversations, or the pressure of daily tasks, silence is something we rarely experience. The world seems to be moving faster, louder, and busier than ever before. But have you ever stopped to think, what if the true power you're searching for is hidden in the very thing we avoid the most? Silence? What if I told you that in that stillness, there's an incredible force that can transform your life? A power that can bring you inner peace, clarity, and even wisdom beyond measure. Today, I want to share a profound story from Buddhist and Zen philosophy, a story that illuminates the immense value of silence. This isn't just any ordinary story. It's one that shows how silence, often overlooked in our noisy world, holds the key to self-discovery, deep fulfillment, and the kind of peace that we all long for but rarely find. Imagine being able to hear your own thoughts without distractions, to truly connect with your inner self, and to experience life in its purest form, free from the chaos of external noise. This is exactly what we're going to explore together. We're going to learn how silence isn't just the absence of sound. It's the doorway to understanding your mind, your heart, and your soul. So, before we dive into this incredible journey, take a moment to pause. Find a quiet space, let go of the rush, and get comfortable. And, if you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you won't miss any of the wisdom we share here. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. Are you ready to discover the power of silence? Let's begin. The story begins, the restless king. Once upon a time, in a vast and prosperous kingdom in India, there was a king who had everything a person could possibly wish for. He was wealthy beyond imagination, surrounded by treasures that sparkled like the stars in the night sky. His fame had spread far and wide, and his power was absolute. He lived in a magnificent palace filled with luxury, servants, and riches. Yet, despite all of these material possessions, the king felt an emptiness within him, a deep, gnawing dissatisfaction that no treasure could fill. Every day, he woke up to the grandeur of his kingdom, yet his mind was restless, and his heart was unsettled. He would pace the halls of his palace, seeking something, though he wasn't sure what it was. His mind seemed always to be in motion, jumping from thought to thought, never able to find rest. The more he acquired, the more disconnected he felt from true happiness. No matter how much wealth, power, or prestige he gained, inner peace always seemed just out of reach. One day, while walking through the palace gardens, the king overheard some of his advisors speaking about a famous Buddhist monk who lived deep in the forests of India, far from the noise and distractions of the royal court. This monk was known for his extraordinary calmness, his deep meditation, and his ability to remain at peace no matter the circumstances. Stories about this monk's wisdom had spread across the land, capturing the curiosity of many, including the king. Intrigued by the idea of someone who could achieve such peace in a world filled with chaos, the king decided that he must meet this monk. He believed that perhaps this wise man could offer him the answers he so desperately sought. So, the king set out on a journey into the forest, accompanied by his trusted entourage. After a long and arduous trek through the thick woods, he arrived at the monk's humble hermitage. The monk was seated in quiet meditation, surrounded by the stillness of the natural world. His presence exuded a sense of peace that the king had never experienced before. With great respect, the king approached the monk and spoke. "Respected monk, I am a man who has everything anyone could wish for: wealth, fame, power, luxuries beyond measure. And yet, despite all of this, my mind is restless. I feel frustrated, tired, and upset. I cannot find peace. No matter what I do, I remain unsettled. Can you help me?" The monk, looking up with a serene smile, replied without hesitation, "You already possess the answer within you, but you have yet to discover it. However, if you are willing, I would like to offer you an experiment. I promise you that if you take part in it, your unrest will disappear." The king, though intrigued, felt a sense of hesitation. He was used to solving problems with action and resources, not with patience and silence. But his frustration had reached its peak. And so, with a mix of curiosity and skepticism, he asked, "What is this experiment?" The monk's answer was simple but profound. "For the next 7 days, I want you to refrain from speaking a single word. Maintain complete silence, both outwardly and inwardly. Observe your thoughts, emotions, and reactions without expressing them. After these 7 days, we shall meet again, and I will help you understand what you've learned." The king, though unsure, agreed. He had tried everything else to find peace. Why not give this a try? Little did he know, this experiment would begin a journey that would change his life forever. The 7 days of silence. Intrigued yet skeptical, the king agreed to the monk's challenge. He returned to his palace, prepared to embark on this experiment that seemed so simple, yet so strange to him. The moment he stepped back into his royal chambers, a flood of thoughts overwhelmed him. His mind, accustomed to the constant hum of activity and conversation, felt uncomfortably still. The thought of not speaking, not even internally, felt unnatural. At first, silence was unbearable. The king's mind was a battlefield of racing thoughts, concerns about his kingdom, his responsibilities, his reputation, and his own self-doubt. The urge to speak, to share his worries with someone, was almost overwhelming. He was used to finding comfort in his words, in the noise of the world that he had so carefully crafted around himself. Without that, he felt lost, as though a part of his identity was slipping away. His thoughts were frantic at first, like a swirling storm of worries, anxieties, and judgments. He tried to suppress them, but they only grew louder in the absence of external distractions. His body, too, seemed to resist the stillness. He wanted to speak, to break the silence, to reach out to someone, anyone, but the monk's instructions were clear, and so the king endured. As the first day passed, the king's discomfort only increased. He sat alone in his chambers, unable to escape his thoughts. Every sound in the palace, every movement, felt like an intrusion. He began to notice just how accustomed he had become to the noise that filled his life. The chatter of servants, the advisors who surrounded him, the constant rush of activity. It all seemed so normal, so necessary. And now, in the absence of it, he felt adrift. But as the days went on, something unexpected began to happen. The silence started to create a strange sense of space. With no one to talk to and no distractions, the king began to reflect deeply on his inner world. He noticed the subtle patterns in his thoughts, how often he judged others, how quickly his mind leaped to conclusions. His inner dialogue was filled with worry and fear, and his sense of inadequacy became glaringly obvious. He realized just how much he compared himself to others, seeking approval and validation, yet always finding himself empty. It was a humbling realization. The king had spent his life seeking external validation, wealth, power, fame, but now, in the silence, he saw that these pursuits were not the cause of his restlessness. The true source of his unease lay within himself. His mind was constantly filled with noise, with desires, with the need to control and conquer. This constant mental chatter prevented him from experiencing the stillness he so desperately sought. As he moved into the second and third days, the king noticed something even more profound. His reactions began to change. Without the ability to speak, he could no longer express his irritation or frustration. He had no one to argue with, no one to impose his opinions upon. For the first time, he could see how often he had used words as a way to assert control over his surroundings and to mask his inner uncertainties. Without those words, he was forced to confront the truth of his emotions. The discomfort slowly began to fade. On the fourth day, the king noticed a shift. His thoughts, which had been like a tumultuous sea, began to settle. He could still hear the usual chatter of his mind, but it no longer overwhelmed him. It was as if the noise had grown quieter, softer, more distant. In that quiet, he started to experience moments of clarity, moments where his thoughts were not frantically running in every direction, chasing after one distraction after another. On the fifth and sixth days, the the king found himself noticing the world around him in a way he never had before. Without the constant noise of conversation, he began to see the beauty in small things. He noticed the rustling of leaves outside his window, the sound of birds in the trees, the movement of sunlight across his floor. He felt an unspoken connection to the world, to the simple and subtle rhythms of nature. His mind, which had once been clouded with the stress of ruling, now felt more attuned to the present moment. By the 7th day, something profound had happened. The king returned to the monk, but he was no longer the same man who had first arrived. His face, once clouded with stress and tension, now held a peaceful expression, one of serenity and understanding. The restlessness that had once ruled his heart seemed to have faded away. He bowed to the monk and said, with deep gratitude, "I have seen it. I have experienced it, the power of silence. In the stillness, I found the peace that I've been searching for my entire life." The monk smiled gently, understanding that the king had discovered something invaluable. It wasn't just silence in the external world that had transformed him. It was the silence within, the quieting of the mind that had allowed him to see the truth of his own thoughts and feelings. Through this experiment, the king had uncovered the root of his restlessness, and in doing so, he had unlocked the path to true inner peace. The deeper realization, silence as a path to self-awareness. The monk, pleased with the king's progress, nodded gently. "You have glimpsed the truth," he said. "By quieting the external noise, you have allowed your inner world to reveal itself to you. True peace does not lie in external possessions or in the distractions of the world. It lies within." The king sat quietly, absorbing the monk's words. A deep sense of gratitude filled his heart, and he realized something profound. His restlessness had never come from his kingdom, his wealth, or his position. It had always been a product of his own mind. He had spent so many years seeking fulfillment in the external world through power, praise, and possessions, but in this moment, he understood that the key to peace had always been inside him. The constant chase for material success had only served to distract him from the deep well of stillness that existed within. He had spent his life so focused on what he could acquire, so distracted by what was happening around him, that he had forgotten how to truly look inward. The external noise had kept him from hearing his own inner voice, and his restless thoughts had clouded his ability to find the peace that was always there. "Now, your journey is just beginning," the monk continued, his voice calm but firm. "True silence is not just about refraining from speaking. It is about observing the mind without judgment, allowing your thoughts to come and go without becoming attached to them. It is about finding stillness within, so that the noise of the world cannot disturb you." The king, humbled and inspired by this wisdom, felt as though a veil had been lifted from his eyes. "What should I do now?" he asked, eager to continue his journey of self-discovery. The monk smiled, his eyes twinkling with understanding. "For the next 15 days, come to my monastery. Live as a common person and practice silence in your daily life. Speak as little as possible, and allow your mind to settle further into the depths of peace." The king agreed, eager to deepen his practice and gain further clarity. He was no longer concerned with the fleeting pleasures of the world. He wanted to find something more lasting, a peace that transcended all external circumstances. As the king entered the monastery, he found himself in a completely different environment than the opulent palace he was used to. The monastery was simple, humble, and serene. The monks who lived there led quiet, focused lives, dedicating themselves to spiritual practice. Gone were the luxuries and distractions of royal life. Here, there was only silence, nature, and the simplicity of being present. For the next 15 days, the king dedicated himself to the practice of silence. He spoke as little as possible, interacting only when necessary. He focused on observing his thoughts without judgment, watching as they came and went like clouds passing through a clear sky. With each passing day, the king began to understand more about himself. He noticed the deep-seated fears and desires that had driven his actions for so long. He observed how his mind often clung to certain thoughts, how he tried to control situations and people to feel secure. He recognized the endless cycle of wanting and wanting more, but never feeling truly satisfied. But as he practiced silence, the king found that his attachment to these thoughts began to weaken. He stopped identifying so strongly with them and allowed them to arise and dissolve naturally. This process of non-attachment was liberating. The king realized that he didn't have to be ruled by his thoughts. Instead of constantly reacting to them, he could simply observe them from a place of stillness, allowing them to pass without needing to act on them. The stillness of the monastery and the simplicity of the monks' lives began to nurture something deep within him. The king started to appreciate the beauty of nature, the sound of the wind rustling through the trees, the gentle murmur of the river, the warmth of the sun on his skin. These simple, everyday moments held a peace that he had never noticed before. In the quiet of the monastery, the king learned to embrace the present moment fully, without the need for distractions or external validation. On the 12th day, something remarkable happened. As the king sat in meditation, his mind, which had once been filled with endless chatter and restlessness, finally settled. It was as if the noise in his mind had evaporated completely. In this profound stillness, the king experienced a moment of deep inner peace. He was no longer chasing after fleeting desires or worrying about the future. His mind, for the first time in his life, was free from worry. In that moment, the king understood something essential. True peace does not come from the external world. It cannot be found in wealth, status, or power. True peace comes from within, from the stillness of the mind. When the mind is quiet and free from the constant pull of distractions, we can finally experience the peace that is always present, waiting for us to discover it. The king had come to the monastery seeking peace, and now, after these days of silence and self-reflection, he had found it. This was not a peace that came from outside circumstances. It was a peace that arose from deep within him, from the stillness of the mind, from the wisdom that silence had revealed. The journey of self-awareness had led him to this realization, and he knew that he would never be the same again. Lessons from silence, applying it to our modern lives. The king's transformation is a profound reflection of the struggles we face in our modern lives. Today, we are immersed in a world of constant noise, digital notifications, endless to-do lists, and the unrelenting pressure to stay connected and productive. This ceaseless bombardment of information makes it increasingly difficult to tune into ourselves, to hear the quiet whispers of our inner thoughts. Just as the king discovered, true peace is not found in the external world but within, in the stillness of our own minds. Silence, as the king learned, is not merely the absence of sound. It is the deliberate act of quieting the mind and creating a space to observe our thoughts without judgment. In this stillness, we can gain a deeper understanding of ourselves, our fears, desires, and attachments. Without the constant distractions of modern life, we allow our minds the opportunity to rest, recalibrate, and reconnect with what truly matters. In our fast-paced world, the idea of embracing silence may seem foreign, even intimidating. Many of us fear stillness because it forces us to confront the thoughts and emotions we often suppress. Yet, it is precisely in this confrontation that growth and clarity are found. Just as the king faced his inner turmoil during his 7 days of silence, we too must allow ourselves the courage to sit with our thoughts. Only then can we begin to understand the root causes of our restlessness. Practicing silence in today's context doesn't require a complete withdrawal from life or spending days in solitude. Instead, it can be as simple as setting aside a few minutes each day for reflection. This could mean meditating in the early morning, taking a quiet walk in nature, or even turning off your devices for a short period to be fully present in the moment. These small acts of intentional silence can help reduce stress, increase focus, and provide a deeper sense of peace. Moreover, silence teaches us the value of mindful communication. In a world where words are often used carelessly, practicing silence helps us to speak with greater intention and awareness. When we learn to listen, to ourselves and to others, we build stronger connections and foster greater empathy. Silence allows us to communicate not just with our words, but with our presence and understanding. Ultimately, The king's journey reminds us that silence is not a luxury. It is a necessity. By embracing moments of stillness, we can step away from the noise of the world and reconnect with the essence of who we are. In doing so, we create space for peace, clarity, and a more meaningful existence. The power of silence, though often overlooked, is a gift available to us all, one that can transform the way we live, think, and connect with the world around us. Conclusion: the true power of silence. As the king discovered, silence is not merely an absence of sound, it is the presence of awareness. When we step into silence, we make space for something much more profound than just quietness. We invite self-awareness, clarity, and inner peace. In the stillness, we can begin to hear our inner voice, free from the noise and distractions of the world around us. It is in these quiet moments that we are able to reconnect with our true selves, to understand the root of our restlessness, and to discover the peace that always resides within us. In today's fast-paced world, the constant hum of activity, emails, notifications, social media, and the pressure to be perpetually busy often drowns out our inner voice. It's easy to get lost in the noise, to get caught up in the cycle of external validation and constant achievement. Yet, as the king learned, the true power of silence is not about retreating from the world. It is about returning to ourselves. By quieting the external world, we can still the restless mind and find a place of peace that exists beyond the distractions of our daily lives. I encourage you to take a moment each day to embrace silence. It doesn't have to be a long, complicated practice. Whether it's through meditation, taking a quiet walk in nature, or simply sitting in stillness for a few minutes, make time for yourself. In these moments, allow your mind to settle, your thoughts to quiet, and your heart to open. You may be surprised at the clarity and insight that arises when you simply listen to the silence. Thank you for joining me on this journey of wisdom and peace. If you found this story inspiring, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more moments of reflection and insight. Until next time, may you find peace in the silence within.